Hello, and welcome to The Realm of Ideas is Free to All. This is episode 55, The Loss of the Poster in the Public Square. Okay, what of consequence has been lost? So we had a preview on Wednesday. We talked about the basics of what we had seen, and we kind of talked relatively shortly about what we would kind of see as an epic time when the poster was a very important part of the realm of public square. Um, what we're going to do is this is an idea that's similar to Julie's previous talk, where she talked about the loss of 2D design. And I think the idea is this again kind of brings up this idea of something. A lot of times people lose something and they understand that they've lost it because they're aware of its importance. Sometimes the importance of things becomes subtle, becomes nuanced, and slips away without our noticing it. And one piece that I read actually at the beginning of that, I'll read again now at the beginning of this, and it pertains, I think, pretty much quite succinctly to this particular idea. And it's by Borges. This is one of my favorite books. And it's called The Witness. It goes like this. I've read this before, but usually what I do in the preview is I kind of read a snippet, but I think this is such a short piece. It amazes me that Borges was so potent and so capable that he basically was like, I would say, like Leonardo. Leonardo could put 5 lines on a page and you basically had a masterpiece. There was never a greater efficiency of simplicity in terms of consequence as Leonardo or as Borges. The Witness. In a stable that stands almost in the shadow of the new stone church, a man with gray eyes and gray beard, lying amid the odor of the animals, humbly tries to will himself into death, much as a man might will himself to sleep. The day, obedient to vast and secret laws, slowly shifts about and mingles the shadows in the lowly place, outside like plowed fields, a ditch clogged with dead leaves, and the faint track of a wolf in the black clay where the line of the woods begins. The man sleeps and dreams, forgotten. The bells for horizons awaken him. Bells are now one of evening's customs in the kingdoms of England. But as a boy, the man has seen the face of Woden, the sacred horrors and the exultation, the clumsy wooden idol laden with Roman coins and ponderous vestments, the sacrifice of horses, dogs, and prisoners. Before dawn, he will be dead, and with him, the last eyewitness images of pagan rites will perish, never to be seen again. The world will be a little poorer when this Saxon man is dead. Things, events that occupy space yet come to an end when someone dies may make us stop and wonder. And yet, one thing or an infinite number of things dies with every man's or woman's death, unless the universe itself has a memory, as theosophists have suggested. In the course of time, there was one day that closed the last eyes that had looked upon Christ. The battle of Junin and the love of Helen died with the death of one man. What will die with me the day I die? What patience, what pathetic or frail image will be lost to the world? The voice of Macedonio Fernandez, the image of a bay horse in a vacant lot on the corner of Serrano and Charcas, a bar of sulfur in the drawer of a mahogany desk. In 2 paragraphs, Borges lays clear and stark the essence of the issue. What slips through our fingers and what of consequence becomes subtly intermingled with obscurity and then falls away without our notice. We talked about this in relationship to the death of 2D design. And though I love the idea of the people right? Rather than state having the exercise of activity towards beauty, truth, and love and genius. I worry about the lack of judgment and discernment as these things of consequence slip through our fingers, never to be seen again, or never to be recognized. At my age, right, I kind of start to see this as a common theme. So, with that said, um, we'll talk about a much more uplifting, as it always is uplifting to be in the realm of genius. And we will talk about what's new in Julie. So,
Thank you. Plenty, it turns out. I completed my drawing at the Met today. I have signed and dated it. My drawing titled Orpiment Alchemy. Subtitle, you can read the subtitle off the bottom.
Paravanilla Hacelari transform arsenic and sulfur into benign hues.
Yeah, that is the subtitle.
Is it para
Paravanilla
Hacelari,
Hacelari, known as
yeah.
P. Hacelari.
He owes me money.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Is a deep sea heat vent worm of a brilliant hue, an ochreous hue that is such a rich, thick color. It is like kabocha mixed with the most saturated yellow lemon. What?
Do you have a picture from your phone of it?
Of the creature?
Of your iPad? Yeah, because I think what's interesting is,
okay,
you know how sometimes, and I think this is really beautiful about this piece,
yeah,
is often scientists will use filters to kind of change the colors in order to kind of contrast certain mechanisms and certain kind of like elements of like morphology and physiology. And this kind of looks like it'd be interesting to see, because I know the color, but I see the fact that you've taken the palette and kind of created almost like a filter to kind of accentuate a lot of the visceral nature that isn't as easily seen in this. Here it's all bleached out, right? The color is quite potent. But what you've done is filtered it with your drawing, right? Then you see that though the architecture is still the same, right? It's almost as if you transformed it with a filter, right?
Yeah. Here's, I can show side by side. If I'm on this side, you're on the other side. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is a close-up of P. Hacelari's antennae. And I have hybridized it with a palanquin that's at the Met. This is a 13th century, I believe, Thai or Cambodian piece, which is in very oxidized, and you can see a lot of structural similarities and, in fact, functional similarities, because a palanquin is used to hold or transport people of royal or important social position. And in fact, P. Hacelari, this gorgeous, saturated, vivid heat vent dwelling worm, is in fact transporting a host of truly toxic chemical elements and is transforming them with its own internal workings, which is incredibly rare. This is a very unique metabolic situation into orpiment, Orpiment, which is in fact a pigment of a brilliant and vivid yellow hue. And it's not a superficial yellow color. It is a richly saturated hue because it is color on a cellular level. And I stress that. Down here, you will see, and I will show you my own research that was not in the Science article. I always do a huge amount of independent research, which is this, which is in fact the actual orpiment, and it is shown in a state of uptake into the cells in these little granular orbs. And that's what I have drawn, like a glistening curtain in the lower left of my drawing, which you'll see my signature is cradled within. Did
Now,
you go super close? Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what does the orpiment do aside from being the vestige of these two toxic compounds that are now basically made kind of benign? What else does it do for the organism?
Well, it's the end result of living in a highly toxic environment, and it does color it colors the entire worm. I surmise that, like a poison dart frog or a highly toxic save something for me. Or a highly toxic fungus or a mushroom, anything in the insect world or the bird world or plant world that is usually intensely hued is very lethal to anything that would eat it. I believe that the worm is using the color as a signal.
As a
Because in fact it is highly toxic. I mean, if something does eat it still has the vestiges of those in it.
So,
it's just not
okay. So it may be a defense, just the same way that
like a poison dart frog. All the animals know not to eat it and to stay away from it. So
okay.
I'm going to plug this back in. You can zoom in close on my drawing while I'm plugging this back in.
I think this was the idea of kind of removing the color so you could see the inherent structures of the pieces and then related to the other pieces that were added, especially the decorative bronze piece. So by having that, you kind of see the image, and it kind of creates the same kind of like ocular circumstance in terms of the idea of transport. So in this case, the metaphor of transport becomes highly active and visceral. Okay, I think this is kind of a very successful drawing.
Thank you. I'm glad you appreciate my drawing.
Yeah.
I used a number of layered metallics sandwiched in between the graphite dust to achieve the effects that I did. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you.
So, we gave a hint last week that we had a kind of a fun event take place.
Yes, we did.
And I think that
would you like to announce it?
On Monday, this Monday at
the 15th.
On the 15th, I think we will be a show that we taped last Monday will air on
television,
local cable TV station, which is part of a national network. I think on FiOS and something else. We have the information, and basically at our next preview, we should have some media things that we can kind of like circulate. So
we're supposed to have an actual tape of our segment.
Yeah, we should have a tape. Yeah,
so we were on television. We were on. Trying to say
exactly. It was fun. It was interesting. I mean, what did you take? What did you? I think that I think it was great. I mean, you kind of instantly, fascinated this guy who was a fascinating guy in his own right. But I think, he kind of recognized the fact that it was important to kind of have you on his show. And also we kind of jumped the line, I think, in terms of the fact that we kind of went from meeting him in a cafe to instantly kind of being on the show.
Less than a week later, he invited us on a show.
Now, what did you, when you were, we do something now where we're basically, I mean, I was explaining to a good colleague and a good friend of the show, Mr. Spock, about how
Hi, Mr. Spock.
Yeah, always good to see you, my friend. And that I use these as a way to kind of ruminate on the ideas themselves. And in fact, today I kind of came to kind of crystallize some thoughts on pieces that I had done earlier about beauty, truth, and love when I talked about that in relationship to Ortega and Whitehead. And I think I kind of had a kind of more concise crystallization today. So I think I'm going to revisit those things down the line. But it was interesting because, here there's actually more of a sense of the fact that there's a performance, even though given that, we have a handful of people watching, as opposed to the fact that this is going to be in front of, God knows, tens of thousands of people
Yeah,
or
they
more.
have a subscriber rate, from what I was told, over 300,000.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
they
wow.
have quite a substantial viewer. They're on all the major cable
Which is fun.
networks, and they stream too. So,
And the thing for me was, like, here I see myself and I see Julie and I know we're talking, but again, for me, this is just kind of ruminating about the ideas. Whereas in that case, I was just sitting at a table in a set,
in a studio.
Yeah, in a studio, and we were just talking to an individual
To the
who was
host.
a very, nice, friendly, and kind of thoughtful man,
And
who
he's
actually
not a
is
famous host.
also a kind of fellow alumni. Kind of like, it turns out we went to the same, we have the same alma mater.
Yeah.
But
He's
he was
a
something.
wonderful.
He was someone I
wonderful
had known about, based on a kind of early, some of my kind of radio listening days.
Yeah, that was
my
very
younger years.
interesting.
No, I mean, I knew who
He's
he
had
was
a
when you told me.
very long, very famous
Yes,
career.
very well established, very well known.
Basically knows everybody in television and especially music. And it was really great. I was thrilled that he wanted us on his show, and there were people who were waiting months to get on. So we were pretty thrilled.
Yeah, he was a very thoughtful man. I look forward to I look forward to seeing him again. And there was talk of a return and other things. So I think that would be valuable, because I think we did a reasonably good job in the short time we had of kind of establishing who we were. But I think one of the things that was left out was what we do, and how it would be something that, given his concern and activity in the community of bringing about certain things that are beneficial, I think that would be something that would also be good to share.
Oh, I think so. We actually, there each person, we were two of four guests, only had 12 minutes. I think after 15 minutes, we were still on, and we didn't have time to get to the conceptual underpinnings or our many projects.
It's a lot to do in that short period of time. And again, I think one of the things that was good was we got a chance to kind of work out a lot of things, because we have gone, into terms of doing our work, whatever that is. But I think what happens
I know what it is.
Oh, good. But it's like, no, again, I think no, not at all. But I think what happens is, like, I think we've kind of come to where we are, and I think that kind of is something that a lot of people may find curious or complex or kind of like confusing. But anyway, I kind of felt as if that was, kind of maybe neither here than there. Anyway, so on to today's topic, which was something that, like I said, I think it's very important. Julie had given us a preview, and now, let's kind of pick up where we left off on the in terms of kind of going into this idea of what you consider, I guess, the golden age of poster art in the public square.
Oh yeah, would you like me to start?
Sure,
I have
absolutely.
A lot of notes and a lot more in my head. What I would like to talk about are two branches, thank you, of poster art. That one is French Art Nouveau poster art, which was the height of the poster. And I want to make it clear, these were advertising posters, but there are some very big differences between the way a venue, a product, or an individual, an occurrence, an event was advertised then and the way they are now. And rather than the hard sell through ugly, in your face, repetitious, badly designed, badly composed, with no thought of color or sophistication, that's advertising now. It is an inelegant, kind of real knuckle dragging, loud, abrasive way of getting into people's heads by banging them over the head. Not so at all with French Art Nouveau poster design. And I'm talking of the golden age, and I will probably have to get my iPad back for these because I have a number of examples, but I will give you the concepts first. The art of Toulouse-Lautrec included at least 363 prints and posters, another 80 that were lost, and probably a lot we do not know about, in addition to Lautrec's fine art paintings, his many, many drawings, his sketchbooks. And he was a wonderful chef, actually. His recipes, his cookbooks. But he did posters for the velodrome, the racetrack, the dance halls, the chanteuses of the day, the can-can dancers, and many, many famous halls, and many, how should I say, very notorious people, one of which I mentioned, La Goulou, which means the glutton in French. And she was a very, very famous entertainer. There are many, many posters of her. 1891 is one of the most famous. And her partner, a boneless man who juggled and did the can-can, who looked like a fish out of water, very, very elastic, extremely skeletal. And I will also say around the same time was Jules Cheret, Sheret, who lived from 1836 to 1932, quite a long time, who was a lithographer and poster artist in the Art Nouveau movement, and some very, very famous pieces. I urge you to look up L'Étendard, a Cheret 1891 poster for a bicycle shop on the Quai d'Orsay. He was trained in London, but went back to his native Paris to basically be at the forefront of early lithography. Which,
No, go ahead.
Which allowed people through two very important things: the technical advances of lithography itself, and the cost of color printing was so reasonable, and the product was so beautiful and technically vivid, elegant, and sophisticated that in the 1870s was the linchpin, was critical for the development of the poster in the public square.
Okay, so I think two things come to mind. And again, I don't know if I'm again, this is not supposed to be a critique. It's just simply an observation. If I believe that there's still a public discussion, there's still discussions in the realm of ideas. I won't go into specific concerns about them right now. But I think, social media has taken that conversation and taken it out of the public square and kind of put it in the cloud. So it does still take place, but but at the same time, the public square, the public space, where there were not just the remnants of the realities of public life, but these posters also were the observations of public life. They were basically at the same time talking about these things. They were giving images of what that was about. Now, we still have that element, but they existed in the public square. One of the things I remember is that Europeans, had really kind of benefited greatly from the idea of kind of like having quick, easy kind of access to information in the public square just by the availability of kind of like lithography and kind of post and printmaking, that things could basically become readily accessible very quickly.
And mass produced and a very high quality at very low cost.
Right. So
this is critical.
Right. So the point is, though we no longer have that completely within the public square still exists. But now we have it balanced between the public square and the cloud. So in this case, what happens in terms of that place? One, these things don't happen simultaneously. It appears as if the public square has become the cloud, and the public square becomes a reflection of the cloud.
Mhm.
So it's no longer the situation where the cloud, where the square, the public square, kind of like identifies the observations of public life. It becomes a reflection of the cloud.
Mm.
And I think that's an interesting thing because I
Mhm.
think it's kind of displaced us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is, let me just kind of
Yeah.
go back to an
Sure.
unbreakable bond. And I think the reality is one of the things that I think has hurt is that because of the fact that there's been a tremendous amount of isolation in public discourse, simply by the idea of people kind of like haphazardly kind of running into other people, there would be a discussion amongst individuals who basically had no prior knowledge or limited prior knowledge of each other, which is something that now I see with the kind of silo mentality of social media.
Mm.
That's kind of changing. So my
And-
concern is, and
yes,
just
right.
finish this up,
Sure. Yeah.
is that, criticism is both observation and discernment. So the thing is, the ability to form judgments, right, that are substantive, rather than simply say, this is my feeling, has become, I think, degraded to a tremendous amount. So that the observation of an individual in terms of that idea of criticism has not really been a situation where, in my case, the first thing is to understand rather than to judge. I think judgment has become an incredibly guttural, reactive kind of circumstance rather than the idea of kind of like having a particular circumstance that one can kind of use as a judgment. Anyway, that was a little bit long-winded, but sorry for that. But that was kind of like, I think, my reaction to what you're
Sure.
saying.
Okay. Well, I would say on that, and then I'll segue back to something, is the perceived personal safety of what I call the isolated argument. It's perceived because it's not, in fact, really very safe. Oh, never take an opportunity. Tea's tea, Jasmine Green. Excellent. Unsweetened, calorie-free. The isolated argument is one which exists in and of itself, not tethered to history or facts or other fields or other opinions. It can be something that's basically conjured out of thin air, and this happens on social media all the time, that it's in fact based on hearsay and other tidbits from social media. But I don't want to go too far.
No, exactly.
I really, that's a whole other show. I want to stress one of the many, many things that the French Art Nouveau poster achieved and why it was so successful. It tapped into several veins of public psychology that are really, really vital for understanding how really successful advertising works. One of which is the creation of fantastical worlds, okay, which beckon forth from the quotidian drudgeries of everyday life. These posters were luminous, they were gorgeous, they were sexy, they were seductive. They were not lewd and they were not offensive. They were sensuous. In fact, I will give you a great example. Are you familiar with Loie Fuller? Now, Loie Fuller was an American, a very paunchy, actually, kind of fat, very short. She was a dancer. She was incredibly ungainly, incredibly ungraceful. She invented a type of veil dance that is still being done today. In fact, the Paul Taylor Dance Company did Loie Fuller's veil dance as part of their Lincoln Center season, and I saw it done a month ago. They did a very graceful version with the dancer in wonderful physical shape. The intriguing thing was how these posters sold Loie Fuller to the public. They were so elegant, so richly hued and textured, so beautiful. And I have photos, and I will bring them of the posters. that she became a sensation.
Hmm.
And this from a person who really did not move very well and was very ungraceful. Was very, very stocky and quite fat. The other thing, and this is very key, was women's liberation. There were promises of freedom and social independence for women in these many posters. And I will bring over some examples. Women were finally able to transport themselves from place to place with the advent of the bicycle. They were not driving at park. Men didn't let women drive, but when finally women were able to, that's on a poster too. It's the idea. It shows women flying with the geese on her bicycle. It shows women soaring into the sunset on wheels and spokes and wings. Was being sold, and it was actually relatively accurate.
Well, it's interesting. I think about that in my own circumstance. I mean, growing up in the 60s in New York City, we'd had the World's Fair.
Yeah.
And the World's Fair was kind of this indelible kind of thing that here in the heart of, working class America, we were going to present the idea of the future. And the future was bold and brash and adventurous and imaginative and creative. And the horizon had no limit. And I think, in that case, the observation of public life was there was no limit to what you could imagine. So when you think of that example, right, there's the standard, but then there's the ideal. Now, we may kind of find that when somebody makes a compelling argument for a certain circumstance that kind of creates a compelling future, that individual goes from being below the standard in one time to being the ideal in the new time. So all of a sudden, right, you think about the fact that there's a paradigm shift. So this woman who is kind of considered slow and awkward and ungainly manages to kind of create this circumstance that allows her to be this exotic, mysterious kind of figure that basically becomes the ideal. And I mean, I know from my own history that, like, in my own life, it's like when I came to love someone, they became the ideal, which took over from the standard. So if everybody wanted a tall, blonde, buxom, whatever, to me, since this was the identification of my love, this became the ideal. So it could be like all kinds of things that were considered and kind of even undesirable, which is why Julie came up with the term brusque, which I find very kind of true, because these circumstances transform the quotidian, right?
Or the coyote ugly.
Yeah, exactly. But they transform the quotidian, right, into the ideal.
Yes.
Right. Because of the way in which it kind of like lifts itself.
Well, yes. On that note, these posters made careers, they made places. The atmosphere and the tastes and the textures of the Moulin Rouge were invented in the posters even before the place took on its full aura. I mean, these places lingered in the public mind and actually grew in the public mind based on these highly successful graphicized posters of what went on in the dance halls, of the atmosphere and the performers. And it was a promise of a better world. And it made the career of Sandra Bernhard, not the horrible comedian who's just god-awful unfunny.
Is she still around?
I don't know. I could
Probably
never
dead by now.
stomach her. But the point is the actress and the posters that were associated with this very famous stage actress had crafted for her. She was like the Wednesday Addams, the original goth chick before Wednesday Addams. These posters had her. I actually was. had her with these elaborate bat and spider web, hats, and they were gothic and they were intriguing and they were quite. I'm going to bring my iPad over and show some of these.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
She was actually a reasonably decent sculptress.
Oh, yeah.
They have a piece of hers at the Met.
Yep.
It's like next to the one of Dumas Fee,
Uh-huh.
and the one of Napoleon III.
Yep.
That little corner has, and there's one of Rossini there, and they're the terracotta cast. They're just beautiful. I love those pieces. If it wasn't for the fact that unfortunately the Met kind of closes them off, so you never really know when they're going to be open. I kind of am always somewhat reticent to go and start a piece there. So I think that situation of we talked about the indelible image, but let me kind of regroup back to this thing I was talking about before.
I'll come with examples.
The public square exists, but the public square basically was the place where the individuals came to kind of meet and speak about the daily life. I mean, in fact, one of the things that was kind of always the case in Paris, especially, but in France, was the newspaper. The newspaper was something that everyone looked to. They read the paper. They talked about world events. It was the kind of thing that was discussed in cafes. Before things started to get feral in the First and Second World Wars, there was just the idea of the common man, or I wouldn't say the common or the average man. The man of the city was knowledgeable on the basis of all things that pertain to culture. And by that, it meant, industry and science and technology and art and painting and the opera. And I think, therefore, all these things kind of pertain to those specific things, as well as the velodrome and the chanteuse.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Louis Fuller, very famous, and this also made the reputation and advertised the Follies, Bergère, all these famous places. This was so enticing, so incredibly exotic. People were lined up for blocks and blocks around the building. This was extremely alluring. These posters were incredibly effective. And I will show you how it made. Here we go. It sold everything from aperitifs, where women were able to drink and they went out with their little pets and their cats, to the marvelous cafes. Aha, here's one of the most famous of all time.
Mm-hmm.
People may have seen this, but I will explain what you are looking at. This made the reputation of the Moulin Rouge. There is the glutton, La Goulou, with her characteristic top knot hairstyle, her pantaloons, her body act, and there is the boneless one right there with her, who was one of her performing partners. He juggled, he did the can. So I went and researched all of these so you could see. It also sold, and this one is quite famous.
Mm-hmm.
It sold the idea of what would happen to you if you went here. You could be an ugly, fat, bald man, which this man was, and have the attentions of a gorgeous young woman if you went to see this show in this club.
Mm-hmm.
That was incredibly alluring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You don't think?
I mean, yeah, and you could kind of say that it was kind of propaganda, but I mean, I think it, like, to a degree, the idea is it's a choice. There's a difference between choice and coercion. And I think what happens is when someone makes a persuasive argument as of, hey, if you make this choice, this possibility may await you, rather than basically saying, if you don't do this, you'll be put in jail. And I think there's a kind of difference between the fact that someone is given an opportunity that may basically be a swindle.
Mhm.
That's completely different than basically someone kind of coercing you into doing something against your will
Yeah.
because they basically hold consequences against
Yeah.
you. No, so I'm
That
saying
wasn't the case.
no. But I'm saying a lot of people criticize, the idea is like, oh, if you go here to this show, you're going to meet a 25-year-old woman. She's going to fall in love with you, and like, maybe some of these things are hyperbolic, but at the same time, selling someone a fantasy is not the same thing as coercion,
Yeah.
because the thing is, the individual has the choice and
Mhm.
has the ability to kind of have discernment. I think in this case, one of the things that was brought about was because of the discussion in the public square,
Mhm.
because of the newspapers, people had the ability to kind of like generate kind of individual judgment
Mhm.
rather than just basically kind of like
Mhm.
follow kind of standard kind of like practice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to show a few other
No, without a doubt,
examples
without a doubt.
because I want
We have
people.
you have plenty of time. You can.
Okay,
There's
I
a lot
want
of time here.
people to understand what these were like. This is a French Art Nouveau poster that is selling hats. With something as, work a day as a hat. But you have a woman who's out there on her own. She is able to shop. She is not stuck in the house. This was a huge thing. It was extremely appealing. Then they got far sexier. Now, who wouldn't want to be this woman if you own a bicycle? You are a goddess, literally. This is a goddess with a bicycle. In fact, I can tell you which goddess. That is Hera, because Hera, if you know your Greek and Roman mythology, was represented by a peacock. So it's very obvious which goddess. So you are not only a goddess, you are a bare-breasted goddess. You have crowds of men at your feet. You're holding the bicycle aloft. So you are a woman of strength, fortitude, and freedom. You are a goddess if you buy this bicycle.
Right, but you're also the kind of men. They're men of action. They're
Yeah.
men of politics.
Yeah, these are
they're
very important
statesmen.
men.
Exactly.
Actually,
They're kind of
these
like
are actually portraits of known statesmen.
probably known
of the
statesmen of the
time.
time.
Yeah, these were incredibly smart. I love this. This is, and you probably have not seen, this is a very rare humor journal illustrated with photography.
Mm.
Now, who would not want to buy a journal when you have a swirling pattern? You have a woman emerging like a cloud of silk and feathers, very, very sophisticated, with a subtle laugh upon her face. I mean, it's a beautiful piece.
Mhm.
Had you seen this one?
No. It's funny. I don't know. I'm going to say something that's going to sound foolish, but it
Yeah.
won't be the first time, won't be the last. We've heard the term don't tell a book by its cover.
Mhm.
But I mean, in fact, posters are exactly that.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know I wonder how that comes about, and if it comes about as a result of a certain failure of the idea of either the poster or, the ability to understand the kind of like implications of something.
I think you can actually tell a great deal about a book by its cover.
I think you can too.
In fact,
if you if you know if your intention is to
Mhm.
make that the case.
Yes.
But I think maybe that kind of starts to happen when people lose the ability to make, as we
Mhm.
talked about on Wednesday, the indelible image.
Yes. This is very important because this is the image I discussed. This poster is quite rare. It equates personal freedom for women, which they had not had. You still see a you still see a woman who is wearing a corset, but she is free. She is flying with the geese. She is fast. She is the mistress of her own adventure. She can take herself wherever she wants to go. So this is very true. The bicycle gave women independence and a freedom to go where and when they wanted
Mobility.
to. Yes, it did. And women did not have that. And this is
No.
a beauty. This woman who is naked under, yeah, that got everyone's attention, who is
Got my
naked is an absinthe ad. And if you look, you see a nipple, you see her naked body.
Well done.
Yes, would you like to hold this up?
Of course. This is art.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But these are absinthe
Mhm.
generated dreams. It basically looks like a Medusa haired woman. I mean, she actually is made to look, and I think this is a very intriguing point, both beautiful and monstrous.
Mhm.
And I do not think that is a mistake.
No, it was.
Would you like to weigh in and
Yeah,
show,
they
and
certainly
show
would.
this?
They
Yeah.
certainly would be. They were too well studied in the vocabulary of expression to
Oh,
not
that's true.
understand what
Yeah.
exactly they were doing.
Yeah.
I think, like I said earlier, I'm all for the idea
Mhm.
of putting the power in the hands of the people as opposed to in the hands of the state.
Love this
However,
one. Yeah.
unfortunately,
Mhm.
the state has done a very good job of making it so that the individuals are not capable of either observation or discernment in any consequential means. So as a result, what we have is the most guttural and superficial of judgments.
Mhm.
And as a result, we don't understand or have the ability to kind of judge what we're looking at. In fact, I was looking at a photograph today. It was kind of embarrassing, but I guess you've seen a lot of these kind of fake photographs kind of going around with AI, and they were kind of talking about this kind of tragic scene and saying it was like this circumstance happened, and it just so happened that the baby that was kind of like being brutalized had three legs, one was and one was pointing in the wrong direction, and his head was on backwards. So you're like, come on, guys.
Are we?
No, I'm just saying,
Are
the
we
thing is,
going
I'm
along?
saying
Yeah.
in terms of this idea, there was nothing that was left to be, kind of interpreted. They were very clear in their intentions based
Yeah.
on what you were saying.
But like these were not trying to pull something over on the public. And I really want to stress this.
Mm.
These were not a case of trying to fool the public or swindle people. It's very different from what is advertised now, when you often buy a product
Mhm.
and it's nothing like is advertised. It doesn't work. It's
Mhm.
not even structurally similar. The color's wrong, the form's wrong, its functions don't function.
Right.
These promise something that was relatively close to what people got.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Right.
that's why I think
Yeah.
I ascribed it
Yeah.
to the 1960s in the fact that, the reality was cars were becoming more efficient, cameras were becoming more efficient, new technologies were coming, but airplanes were kind of like becoming,
Right.
a common thing. We were going into space.
Mhm.
Suddenly, mobility and efficiency of movement became something where people had time saved so they could devote that to something
Independence of life.
Exactly.
I want to
So
make
I
sure we
think
get
there's
to
a
the
difference
Victory
between
Garden. Oh, yeah.
between aspiration and coercion,
Yeah.
because this was just basically saying this possibility exists. Maybe it's tied to this product. Maybe that, later on when those products would no longer make that compelling reality, that was kind of like coercive, or that was basically fraudulent. But the point was, in this case, the aspiration was something that was common to the horizon of the individuals, unlike today.
Okay, I want to.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I want to make sure we
You
have
can
time
talk for the. You can talk for. I won't say.
for the Victory Garden. We're kind of running out of time. It's very important. You was zipping up your lip? Okay. So the final French poster I was just showing was for the Hippodrome, and what they are selling was not too far off from what someone got. Was spectacle, not Roman gladiator blood, death, and brutal maulings, but beautiful, fantastical spectacle of horses and women and magic, and it was all really luscious. Now I'm going to contrast this with the public poster for information in times of war, and this is incredibly important. For those of you who don't know what a Victory Garden is, you might not even have heard the term. It's not bandied about much. It's a very important term. people were encouraged in World War One, but especially in World War II, and it grew out of British people, but came to exist in Australia and here too, to grow your own victory garden. And the victory in World War II was obviously a victory over the Nazis, a victory over fascist Italy, fascist Spain. It was very important because there were food shortages everywhere. And especially in England, a lot of people didn't eat unless they grew their own food. And if anyone knows about the British climate, you can't grow food all year round. So people were encouraged to go.
Unless you grow it in cans.
That's fun. That's so great. So also, a lot of children during the war and a lot of adults suffered from and died from severe malnutrition. There were major shortages of fresh food. So the British had a series, and the British poster grew out of a very different, it was the precursor to French Art Nouveau. So the British posters, they emerged in the 1880s. It was called the modern style. That is literally what the name of the movement is. This evolved from the earlier arts and crafts movement. The arts and crafts was very graphic, turned out a lot of beautiful furniture and stained glass, but printing wasn't quite up to what they needed to do yet. These were popularized, interestingly, by a department store, the famous Liberty and Company, and a magazine called The Studio. These two places, these two entities, literally brought into the public mind, eye, and consciousness the modern style, which was characterized by the same elements as would be used in Art Nouveau: the whiplash curve, the holistic integration of objects, human figures, animals, patterns, and design elements, organic forms everywhere, inspiration from plants and nature. So arts and crafts was the root of modern style. So 1880 to about 1920. I just wanted to say I disagree that this morphed and was represented by 1920s Japanese Mingei. That was entirely different, but people try to push that the Mingei, which was a folk art, wabi-sabi, rustic imperfection type of a movement based on folk crafts and folk tales, and basically a long Japanese tradition of folk art, something entirely different. The elegance, the perfection of nature, and the whiplash curve, not Mingei. Charles Rennie Mackintosh was, in fact, the most key figure of the modern style. And he produced many posters and books and the menus and, opera programs. Graceful and sophisticated, but I will show you, if you don't mind holding.
That's about as
Yeah.
indelible an image as anyone could. I mean, honestly, I remember seeing that
Yeah.
so many times in
Yeah.
school. It was kind of something that was very much,
This is a victory garden poster.
Yeah. But everyone in my generation, everyone saw this poster.
Yeah.
Even though this existed long before
Try to
us.
move it so it's flat. Yeah. Oh, great. Perfect. Okay. And the next one, if I may, is great.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've seen all, it's interesting. I've seen all
these.
These
are really famous. They also used a lot of very dry humor to appeal to the public. They were trying to get people to save their waste, to feed the cows and the pigs and the chickens. There were major shortages of animal feed. In fact, a lot of animals died because there wasn't adequate food. You probably saw this. This is a really iconic. And this actually did help win the war, because a lot of troops starved. I mean, when the Germans tried to invade, Russia in the middle of the winter, they starved to
They
death.
starved to death.
So, like, it's not a small thing. The idea of growing your own food. Oh, this is really super.
I think
famous.
also the thing is
This
that
isn't
it's the patriotism of self-sufficiency.
Well, if you see,
I mean, the thing is, there was the fact that, again, and I mean, in America, you could kind of see yourself as someone isolated, even in Britain sometimes.
That's an American.
But at the same time, the idea of the kind of like independence and self-sufficiency was something that needed to be kind of understood.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
I'll show this. It also, basically it proposed the idea of canning and pickling. I mean, any food you found, anything that you could grow in the ground was considered a step towards victory in the war. And the women had a huge role.
Yeah.
I mean, so the preservation of food, growing your own fruits and vegetables. Everyone had chickens, that you had all the eggs that you could eat. It's a beautiful one.
I think the Saturday Evening Post was the end of that era.
Yeah.
And the fact that like there was a kind of certain civilization, but there was a certain reality to kind of public life of a kind of reasonable kind of discernment and kind of like observation.
Would you like to show the Macintosh?
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. Charles Rennie Mackintosh, one of our absolute
Heroes,
favorite, was a hero, architect, a designer, did beautiful watercolors, great graphic designer.
Completely underappreciated.
Oh, totally.
Okay, so.
Yeah, so.
All right.
I hope that was.
I think it was. It was. It really was. Yeah. So, I mean.
Tried to cover a lot of ground.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I think what happens is this is kind of like going back to a kind of common theme. It's kind of basically related to that circumstance of that idea we talked about in the loss of 2D design. And I think, again, the way I interpret that theme is very much in terms of that, let me just wrap up for me, is the fact that I love the idea of leaving individuals in the public square to their own devices. But I believe that one of the unfortunate realities is the people are not equipped. And they're not equipped because they're not kind of learning reasonable, good skills. I think that the idea of the entitled judgment is kind of wrongfully leading people to a certain sense of authority they don't hold. And I think that that is a kind of like, the individuals who kind of held sway in the public square were people who are capable of making a compelling argument. No one rules by force. You simply kind of suppress and you oppress. You rule by making consequential statements that basically kind of like have a weight that carry and persuade. So anything less? And then I'll kind of just close.
Yes, I never even got to discuss, but this is for a future show. One of the first graphic design agencies in Paris was Atelier Choubrac, formed by the brothers Alfred and Léon. And I imagine if Alfred was asked what his posters did for the public imagination, for the sense of public comfort and safety, I believe that he would have said something like, I'm giving them the world that they would most like to live in.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Next week, we're going to talk about Maeterlinck's organic engineering.
Ooh.
And it's something we're looking for. After that is drawing as a generator and then copying and plagiarism. So that's it for now. The realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to the benefit of all for us to keep it this way.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.